In 1976, Carrie shocked audiences with blood, fear, and teenage cruelty. And nearly 50 years later, the lives behind those faces have changed just as dramatically. Some rose higher than anyone imagined. Others quietly disappeared. And a few transformed in ways you may never have noticed. Until now. Join us as we rediscover who they became and honor the legacy they left behind. Sissy Spacek as Carrie White. Sissy Spacek was born on December 25, 1949, in Quitman, Texas, United States. At 26 years old, she played Carrie White, the shy, abused high school girl with telekinetic powers, in Carrie, 1976. Her performance transformed Stephen King's horror story into a deeply emotional tragedy, grounding supernatural terror in real human pain. That single role became the emotional spine of the film and changed how audiences understood fear on screen. That depth did not appear by accident. Spacek's childhood was outwardly calm but shaped by quiet isolation and early emotional responsibility. Growing up in a small Texas town, she learned early what it meant to feel different, especially as she gravitated toward music and performance. The defining rupture came with the death of her brother from leukemia, a loss she later described as the moment fear permanently left her life. Carrying that grief, she moved to New York at 18, surviving on modeling, singing, and acting classes, slowly sharpening the discipline that would surface in Badlands and Prime Cut. When Carrie finally arrived, it released years of suppressed resilience. Spacek proved she was not a one-film phenomenon, choosing demanding roles that deepened her reputation. That path culminated in her Oscar-winning transformation as Loretta Lynn in Coal Miner's Daughter, 1980, followed decades later by restrained, devastating work in the Bedroom and The Help. Each performance reinforced her ability to translate private pain into quiet authority. Away from the screen, her life moved in a very different direction. Spacek married production designer and director Jack Fisk in 1974, building a family far from Hollywood chaos. Together they raised 2 daughters, including actress and singer Skylar Fisk, balancing creative collaboration with domestic stability. Today, Sissy Spacek is 76 years old and lives at a slower pace on a Virginia farm, choosing selective roles and creative privacy over visibility. Her estimated net worth of around $15 million reflects longevity rather than excess. More than wealth or awards, her legacy rests in how she turned grief into gravity and silence into power. Piper Laurie as Margaret White. Piper Laurie was born on January 22, 1932, in Detroit, Michigan, United States. At 44 years old, she played Margaret White, the fanatically religious, emotionally violent mother, in Carrie, 1976. Her portrayal shifted the film's horror inward, making the home itself a place of terror. With that performance, Laurie reshaped the story's emotional core and reignited her long-stalled career. The intensity she brought to the role echoed a life formed by early emotional fracture. Laurie's childhood was marked by displacement and isolation after being sent to a residential institution at a young age. That sense of abandonment followed her into adulthood, where Hollywood attention arrived early but offered little protection. Even after her breakthrough in The Hustler, 1961, stability remained elusive, pushing her toward stage and television as inner pressure quietly built. By the time Carrie arrived, Laurie was no longer chasing approval. The role reopened doors that had long been closed, leading to acclaimed later performances in Children of a Lesser God and the cult series Twin Peaks. These characters reflected an actress unafraid to expose emotional damage rather than conceal it. Her private life, however, carried a heavier cost. Laurie married film critic Joe Morgenstern in 1962, and while they shared a daughter, the relationship struggled under creative imbalance and emotional distance. Their divorce in 1982 triggered a period of depression, yet Laurie refused to disappear. She continued working steadily, writing memoirs, sculpting, and returning to the screen with quiet persistence. Sadly, she died on October 14, 2023 in Los Angeles at the age of 91 after prolonged health complications related to advanced age. With an estimated net worth of $5 million, Piper Laurie left behind not a story of excess, but one of endurance. Her legacy remains rooted in performances that turned personal isolation into unforgettable psychological force. Amy Irving as Sue Snell. Amy Irving was born on September 10, 1953 in Palo Alto, California, United States. At 23 years old, she played Sue Snell, the girl consumed by guilt after taking part in Carrie's bullying, in Carrie, 1976. Her performance introduced moral conscience into the film, giving the story its only sustained note of remorse and humanity. Without Sue Snell, Carrie would have been pure cruelty. Irving made it tragedy. That emotional awareness was shaped early. Raised in an intensely artistic household with a director father and actress mother, Irving grew up moving constantly between cities and stages. She learned discipline early, but also absorbed relentless expectations. By her teens, Broadway and formal acting schools replaced normal adolescence, pushing her toward professionalism before emotional stability had time to form. That early pressure translated into a career built on intelligence rather than spectacle. After Carrie, Irving moved fluidly between film, television, and theater, earning an Oscar nomination for Yentl, 1983, and later critical recognition in Traffic, 2000. Roles in series like Alias and voice work as Jessica Rabbit in Who Framed Roger Rabbit expanded her range, proving she could disappear into vastly different worlds. Her personal life, however, proved far more turbulent than her screen presence suggested. Irving married Steven Spielberg in 1985, and while the union produced a son, it collapsed under the weight of global fame and constant absence. The divorce in 1989 left her emotionally shaken despite the historic financial settlement, and she later admitted to struggling mentally in its aftermath. Subsequent marriages to Bruno Barreto and later Kenneth Bowser brought greater stability, though none erased the imprint of that first rupture. Now, Amy Irving is 73 years old, living a quieter life split between music, selective acting, and personal projects. With an estimated net worth of $120 million, built from decades of work, investments, and past settlements, her story stands as a reminder that success does not shield the heart. It only tests it differently. John Travolta as Billy Nolan. John Travolta was born on February 18, 1954, in Englewood, New Jersey, United States. At 22 years old, he played Billy Nolan, the reckless bully who helps trigger Carrie's destruction, in Carrie, 1976. Though not the film's lead, his role embodied the casual cruelty that fuels the story's catastrophe. That performance quietly foreshadowed a career defined by extremes. Those extremes began early. Raised as the youngest of 6 children in a financially strained household, Travolta grew up fast. With a semi-professional athlete father and an actress mother, performance was both refuge and responsibility. Struggling academically, he dropped out of high school at 17 to pursue acting, a decision that created tension at home but set him on a collision course with fame. Fame arrived suddenly and violently. Saturday Night Fever and Grease turned Travolta into a global icon before he turned 25, followed decades later by a career resurrection in Pulp Fiction. Yet between those peaks lay professional misfires, public ridicule, and relentless pressure to reinvent himself. Films like Hairspray later revealed his willingness to challenge his own image, even when critics hesitated. His private life carried far heavier wounds. Travolta married actress Kelly Preston in 1991, and together they built a family that became his emotional anchor. That stability shattered in 2009 with the death of their son Jet, whose seizure-related passing left Travolta devastated. The grief deepened when Preston herself died from breast cancer in 2020, forcing him into prolonged emotional withdrawal and reliance on faith and family to survive. Today, John Travolta is 72 years old, living more privately while remaining selectively active in film. His estimated net worth of $250 million, drawn from acting, aviation ventures, and real estate, contrasts sharply with the personal losses that define his later years. Behind the smile of a Hollywood legend stands a man shaped as much by grief as by applause. William Katt as Tommy Ross. William Katt was born on February 21, 1951, in Los Angeles, California, United States. At 25 years old, he played Tommy Ross, the kind-hearted student who takes Carrie to the prom, in Carrie, 1976. His character introduced compassion into a story driven by cruelty. That gentleness made the film's collapse even more devastating. That sensitivity had roots in an unsettled childhood. Born into a famous acting family, with father Bill Williams and mother Barbara Hale, Katt grew up under constant expectations. Frequent moves dictated by his parents' careers left him feeling isolated, and he initially turned to music as an escape before committing fully to acting. Even early on, creativity for him was less about fame than survival. Carrie opened doors, but it was television that defined him. In the early 1980s, Katt became a household name through The Greatest American Hero, blending vulnerability and humor in a way audiences embraced. Films like House and later appearances in series such as Heroes kept him visible, though work came in waves rather than a steady stream. Between projects, he quietly faced financial strain, a reality rarely associated with recognizable faces. His personal life followed a similar pattern of contrast. Katt married Deborah Kahane in 1979, and together they had 2 sons, but the pressures of career uncertainty contributed to their divorce in 1992. A year later, he married Danielle Hirsch, building a second family that brought greater emotional stability. Still, the long stretches between roles left lasting stress beneath the surface. In 2026, William Katt is 75 years old, continuing to work selectively in acting, writing, and fan-driven creative projects connected to his past roles. With an estimated net worth of around $500,000, his life reflects endurance more than excess. Nancy Allen as Chris Hargensen. Nancy Allen was born on June 24, 1950, in the Bronx, New York, United States. At 26 years old, she played Chris Hargensen, the primary bully who orchestrates Carrie's humiliation, in Carrie, 1976. Her performance embodied raw malice, giving the film its human antagonist and igniting its chain of violence. Without Chris, the horror would never have been unleashed. That ferocity was forged early. Raised in a working-class New York neighborhood by a police officer father and a homemaker mother, Allen grew up surrounded by street violence and pressure to escape poverty. Dance became her refuge, though physical strain and injury complicated that path. Acting followed as a second escape, but insecurity and academic struggles shadowed her progress. After Carrie, Allen became closely associated with director Brian De Palma, appearing in Dressed to Kill and Blow Out, performances that earned critical acclaim and a Golden Globe nomination. Later, mainstream fame arrived through RoboCop. Despite steady work, the emotional toll of intense roles and industry pressure gradually accumulated. Her personal life was marked by instability. Allen married Brian De Palma in 1979, but the union collapsed in 1984 under creative and emotional strain. Subsequent marriages to Craig Shoemaker and later Randy Bailey also ended in divorce, leaving her without children and battling periods of depression. Over time, she chose distance from Hollywood rather than confrontation with it. Today, Nancy Allen is 76 years old, living a quieter life devoted to advocacy rather than acting. After stepping away from film in 2008, she became executive director of a cancer support center, reshaping her legacy around service. With an estimated net worth of $4 million, her story closes not with applause, but with purpose. Betty Buckley as Miss Collins. Betty Buckley was born on July 3, 1947, in Big Spring, Texas, United States. At 29 years old, she played Miss Collins, the gym teacher who tries unsuccessfully to protect Carrie in Carrie, 1976. Her role represented fragile authority, the one adult voice attempting to stop cruelty before it turned fatal. That quiet failure deepened the film's sense of inevitability. That tension echoed Buckley's own beginnings. Raised in a rigid military household with an Air Force colonel father, she grew up under emotional and physical pressure that eroded confidence early. Discipline ruled daily life, leaving little room for vulnerability. Singing and performance became her refuge, a place where pain could be shaped into control rather than fear. That refuge turned into a formidable career. Buckley rose to prominence on television with 8 is Enough, then conquered Broadway by winning a Tony Award for Katt's, 1983, her voice becoming legendary through memory. Film roles such as Tender Mercies and later Split proved she could carry both warmth and menace, moving effortlessly between stage and screen. Her private life, however, never followed a conventional arc. Buckley married Peter Flood in 1972, but the relationship dissolved 7 years later due to incompatibility and career demands. She chose not to remarry or have children, instead pouring her emotional energy into work. Years of vocal strain led to a serious voice injury, forcing her to rebuild the very instrument that defined her identity. Now, Betty Buckley is 79 years old, still performing, teaching, and recording music with discipline earned through survival. Having overcome breast cancer diagnosed in 2010, she continues to work with clarity and purpose. With an estimated net worth of $4 million, her legacy rests not in comfort, but in resilience turned into sound. P.J. Soles as Norma Watson. P.J. Soles was born on July 17, 1950, in Frankfurt, Germany. At 26 years old, she played Norma Watson, one of the girls who joins the bullying, in Carrie, 1976. Though initially written as a minor character, her role grew into a secondary antagonist, adding fuel to the cruelty that drives the film toward catastrophe. Her presence sharpened the group dynamic that made the horror believable. That unease mirrored her early life. Raised in a constantly moving international household with a Dutch father and American mother, Soles grew up across Morocco, Venezuela, and Belgium. Constant relocation created cultural fluency but emotional instability, leaving her with a lingering sense of displacement. Acting became a way to anchor herself when nothing else felt permanent. Carrie opened the door to cult status rather than mainstream stardom. Soles became a defining face of late 1970s genre cinema through Halloween and Rock and Roll High School, followed by popular films like Stripes. Yet the work came at a cost. During the prom sequence of Carrie, she suffered a ruptured eardrum, an injury that symbolized how physically demanding even supporting roles could be. Her personal life reflected similar turbulence. Soles married Dennis Quaid in 1978 after meeting on set, but the marriage collapsed under competing careers and constant separation. A later marriage to Skip Holm brought 2 children, but also ended in divorce. Each transition reinforced the instability that had followed her since childhood. Today, P.J. Soles is 76 years old, largely retired from acting, but still embraced by horror fans worldwide. With an estimated net worth of around $1 million, her legacy lies in cult cinema rather than fortune. She remains a symbol of how fleeting roles can leave permanent marks. Priscilla Pointer as Mrs. Snell. Priscilla Pointer was born on May 18, 1924, in New York City, United States. At 52 years old, she played Mrs. Snell, Sue's quietly conflicted mother, in Carrie, 1976. Her character stood on the edge of the tragedy, representing parental guilt that arrives too late. That restrained presence added emotional gravity to the aftermath of the horror. Her sensitivity was shaped early by hardship. Growing up during the Great Depression, Pointer experienced poverty firsthand and entered adulthood already carrying responsibility. She worked early to survive and pursued theater not out of privilege, but as a possible escape from financial insecurity. Discipline and endurance became survival tools long before they became acting skills. That foundation sustained a career spanning more than 6 decades. Pointer appeared in over 90 films and television projects, gaining recognition in Dallas, Blue Velvet, and A Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Often cast as stern but wounded authority figures, she brought quiet realism rather than spectacle. Even when playing mothers repeatedly, she avoided sentimentality, choosing restraint instead. Her personal life offered rare stability. Pointer was married to director Jules Irving from 1947 until his death in 1979, raising 3 children, including actress Amy Irving. In 1980, she married actor Robert Simons, and their partnership lasted until his death in 2007. That second loss marked a deep emotional rupture late in life, after decades of shared work and companionship. Sadly, Priscilla Pointer died on April 28, 2025 in Ridgefield, Connecticut, from natural causes related to advanced age. She was 100 years old. With an estimated net worth of $3 million earned through persistence rather than fame, she was remembered not for stardom, but for longevity and quiet strength. Sidney Lassick as Mr. Fromm. Sidney Lassick was born on July 23, 1922, in Chicago, Illinois, United States. At 54 years old, he played Mr. Fromm, the bitter, sarcastic English teacher, in Carrie, 1976. His character embodied institutional cruelty, reinforcing how authority can humiliate rather than protect. That cold detachment sharpened the film's sense of isolation. His life began under strain. Raised by poor Russian Jewish immigrants, Lassick grew up amid economic hardship and social discrimination. He worked from a young age and later served in the U.S. Navy during World War II, an experience that hardened his worldview. The tension of survival never fully left him, even after the war ended. Acting became his outlet, not his rescue. Lassick carved out a prolific career as a character actor, appearing in over 200 film and television projects. He became unforgettable as Charlie Cheswick in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Roles in shows like The X-Files reinforced his reputation for unsettling, psychologically charged characters. Sadly, Sidney Lassick died on April 12, 2003 in Los Angeles from complications related to diabetes. He was 80 years old. He was buried at Mount Sinai Memorial Park Cemetery, marked by a simple stone bearing his name and a Star of David. With an estimated net worth of $500,000, his legacy rests in indelible performances rather than material reward. Michael Talbott as Freddie. Michael Talbott was born on February 2, 1955, in Waverly, Iowa, United States. At 21 years old, he played Freddie, one of the aggressive young men involved in the bullying, in Carrie, 1976. His role contributed to the pack mentality that pushed cruelty beyond restraint. Even briefly, his presence sharpened the film's realism. His early life was quieter but still demanding. Raised in a small Midwestern town, Talbott faced pressure when he chose acting over stability, moving to Hollywood at a young age. The uncertainty of that leap created stress long before success arrived. However, persistence carried him forward in television. Talbott became widely known as Detective Stanley Switek on Miami Vice, a role that defined his career through the 1980s. He also appeared in films like First Blood and National Lampoon's Vacation, often cast as volatile or impulsive figures. Over time, his on-screen intensity became his signature. As roles slowed in the early 2000s, he stepped away from acting entirely in 2003, choosing personal stability over reinvention. Today, Michael Talbott is 71 years old, living in Waverly, Iowa, far from the industry that once defined him. With an estimated net worth of $2 million, earned during his active years, he represents a rare Hollywood exit, deliberate, quiet, and final. Doug Cox as the Beak. Doug Cox was born around 1950 in the United States. At 26 years old, he played the Beak, a minor but intimidating student, in Carrie, 1976. Though his role was small, it added to the hostile social atmosphere that defined the film. Every face in that crowd helped turn cruelty into something collective. Following Carrie, Cox continued working in smaller film and television projects during the late 1970s. His screen presence leaned toward background and supporting roles rather than leads. These performances placed him consistently within ensemble casts, where atmosphere mattered more than dialogue. It was steady work, even if rarely spotlighted. As the industry shifted in the 1980s, Cox gradually moved away from on-screen acting. He transitioned toward production-related roles, remaining connected to filmmaking without remaining in front of the camera. This shift allowed him to stay professionally active while adapting to changing opportunities. Today, Doug Cox is approximately 76 years old. His estimated net worth of $500,000 comes from acting work and later involvement in production, marking a career built on contribution rather than celebrity. Noelle North as Frida. Noelle North was born on July 11, 1949, in the United States. At 27 years old, she played Frida, one of the girls present in the social circle around Carrie, in Carrie, 1976. Her role blended into the everyday school environment that made the film's violence feel disturbingly real. The normality around Carrie was part of the horror. After Carrie, North continued appearing in film and television, but her career soon expanded into voice acting. Animation offered her range, consistency, and longevity. This shift allowed her to work continuously across decades while remaining adaptable to changing industry trends. She became widely known for voice roles in animated series such as Chip and Dale, Rescue Rangers, Adventures of the Gummy Bears, and The Legend of Prince Valiant. These projects placed her voice into childhood memories across generations. Voice acting became the core of her professional identity. In 2026, Noelle North is 77 years old. With an estimated net worth of $1 million earned through decades of voice acting and screen work, her career stands as an example of durability built on craft rather than visibility. Nearly 50 years later, Carrie, 1976, is no longer just a horror film. It's a time capsule of lives, choices, and quiet transformations behind the camera. Some found fame, others found peace, and a few simply disappeared from the spotlight, leaving only fragments behind. So when you look at them now, in 2026, who do you feel changed the most, and whose story surprised you? If you enjoyed this journey through Carrie, then and now, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more untold stories from classic films.